I knew this was a big story when it happened. I didn't know it was trending #1 on Twitter big. Well, now I know better. We have a rule on Close Call Sports. No politics. It's been our policy since day one. So I'm going to do my absolute best to talk about Rob Drake's tweet, which was very political, without talking about politics. So wish me luck. We all have political opinions, and that's fine. But here is what makes this story unique. If you haven't heard, Drake on Tuesday allegedly tweeted that he was going to buy an AR-15 if a certain political event happened and that there would be another civil war, however that's spelled, and that got picked up, and then subsequently the tweet was deleted, the account was deactivated, which is probably a good thing at this point. So I want to make it very clear to all officials at all levels, not just MLB, not just professional, but Little League on up. If you're an umpire, if you're a referee, your social media is public, and you have to assume that your players, your teams, coaches, your bosses are going to see what you write, especially on Twitter. On Twitter, if you don't have that little lock that says it's a protected account, anyone in the world could find anything that you say. Even if you do have the little lock on your account, someone could screenshot it or tell someone else what you said. You have to assume that everything you say is public and will be seen by everyone, and that they're going to do whatever they want to do about it. And you might say freedom of speech, and I want to talk about freedom of speech. But first I want to talk about Phil Cuzzy. Why? In August, I talked about Phil, and I encourage you all to watch that video because it's very important. Phil, it was in Chicago, in a courtroom, when he was asked a question, with a reporter there, was asked a question, just as banter, who complains the most in baseball? And Phil handled it beautifully. He chuckled, tapped the reporter on the shoulder, and left the room without answering the question. Because he knew if he said anything, if he gave any name, that would be a huge story. Impartial umpire has bias against player. Joe West learned this a few years ago when he talked to a reporter, and he was asked the question, who's the biggest complainer in baseball, and he said it was Adrian Beltre. Beltre laughed, he laughed, everyone thought it was a joke, but MLB thought, that's not a joke, you're an umpire. This gives the appearance that you are not impartial. We're suspending you 3 games. This is serious stuff, folks. So when the Cuzzy thing happened, I said, it's a lighthearted moment, it's really funny, it's a great story, but it could have been very, very serious. And Rob Drake is an example of what happens when it becomes very, very serious. Because he can say his politics all day. You have freedom of speech. But freedom of speech has limits. Let me talk about that really quickly. When you say your political view, the government cannot do anything to you. Actually, it goes beyond that. Your employer cannot retaliate against you for your politics. That's a federal law for employment. But it's not limitless. There is still the court of public opinion that doesn't care what the law says. And there is an element of Drake's tweet, multiple elements, that go beyond that, where he mentions a firearm and he mentions civil war, however that's spelled. That goes beyond simple politics. And you are not protected when it comes to going beyond politics and talking about that. For instance, if you make a criminal threat, the government can arrest you because that's no longer freedom of speech. You've made a criminal threat. So if a reasonable person, where Drake makes his tweet, would think he's talking about violence and things like that, his employer, MLB, might want to get involved and look at it, which I believe they are looking at it. Because that's not just politics. If a reasonable person would interpret that as an invocation of violence, that's more severe than that. And this is why I say, no matter what your level, what your sport, if you're an official, everything you do is public. Just like this. I know how the media works, and I'm pretty sure, from an educated guess standpoint, that the media knew that Rob Drake's Twitter account existed, maybe as many as 6 months ago, maybe longer than that. They knew he was tweeting. They knew he was tweeting political stuff. They knew that maybe some of his friends had been tweeting political stuff, who are also umpires. And they knew the account, and they were following the account. Maybe not overtly, but in their tweet deck, they had a feed of his account, or they knew somehow that they would get updates of what he was saying. And they were just waiting for him to go beyond simple politics and say something like this about the gun, where they could take that tweet and say, "We got you," and run with it and do whatever they wanted. They were just waiting for this to happen, and it happened. So it's a cautionary tale. If you are a sports official at any level in any sport, and if you are working NFHS or NC2A, those two levels have social media policies in their documentation, if it's not their ethics code or what have you. There's information. Referee Magazine talks about using social media as an official. Be careful. You have to assume that everything you say gets back to every player, coach, boss, crewmate, the commissioner. Everyone's going to find out about everything that you say. So be careful about what you say. Just think, do I really need this account in this capacity? Do I really want to say this? I mean, it's great to share. I can share my pictures, these positive, uplifting things. Again, we talked about in the Cuzzy video. Please, like what we do. We are very grateful for that. But be careful about when you put out your own tweet that is very strongly worded, that goes beyond simply having a political opinion and gets into other issues that might be more severe, that a reasonable person might interpret as whatever they interpret it as. That's what happened here. And so this is a developing story. This unfortunately happened on the day of a World Series game, so it became a distraction, but we do not want to distract from the entire World Series with this. So we're going to have a lot more analysis when the offseason hits, but for now, right now, I just wanted to just clearly convey, if you have a social media account and you're a sports official, be careful what you say, because you have to assume that everyone in the world has access to it, and it might be beneficial for you to stop and think about what you're doing if it's a really good idea before you send out that text or photo or what have you. In any case, visit us on closecallsports.com for the rest of the postseason and beyond. We'll pick this story up again after the postseason has concluded. And thanks for following us, speaking of social media, on Twitter at Umpire Ejections. Facebook is also at Umpire Ejections. We'll see you on Close Call Sports.